Chapter 7. Vincent's expression darkened. He was ready for a fight, and Zero was clearly enjoying his irritation. "What the hell is that? Where was it? And you hiding?" Vincent demanded, grinding his teeth. "Is this like that insect you put on my hat?" Zero threw back his head and laughed as he stood from the top of the stern, looking down his nose at Vincent. "Insect? You mean the bug that I placed on you, right?" he drawled, jumping gracefully from the boat, barely making an impact or indentation on the sand. Every word Zero spoke sent waves of frustration and anger through Vincent, although he did not know why. Nevertheless, Vincent wanted nothing more than to wipe that infuriating smirk clean off his face. Zero continued his explanation. "We have technology that hides anything made from a special metal we developed. It's like the illusionary barrier around the ghetto, military grade. But ours is better. It can even hide people if they're touching it, but they have to either be incredibly still or concealed entirely." He paused in front of Vincent. The intense rage that Zero brought out of him had quickly ebbed, the technology before his eyes piquing his curiosity instead. "You gotta be joking," Vincent exclaimed in wonder. "That's incredible." Zero scoffed at his remark. "Nah, the real joke was that pitiful display you put on in Starfall." Vincent's frustration returned in force. He locked his eyes with Zero, and he curled his hands into tightly wound fists. "I mean, I figure you'd be stupid enough to travel at night, but to think you'd literally stumble on a hellhound pack, and that you would only put down a few of them." A smug look sprawled across Zero's face, and he slapped Vincent on his injured shoulder, knowing full well that he wasn't fully healed. "Frankly, I'm disappointed." Vincent clenched his jaw to hide his wince, refusing to give Zero the satisfaction. He met his gaze with a fierce intensity. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Vincent hissed. "How did you know all that? Huh? Were you there?" Zero's smile widened as he looked off into the distance. He pretended to take a moment to appreciate the fine weather, but this too was just another way to belittle Vincent. And Vincent knew this. "That's right. I was there. I was there when you saw my message in the dirt. I was there when you got yourself lost by looking at every bloody thing that caught your eye. And I was there when you made the idiotic decision to jump your way through the forest after dark and landed on that hellhound." Zero laughed heartily, and he turned back to face Vincent. I mean, I wanted to laugh so hard that I almost gave myself a thwack." Zero fell backward into the sand with Vincent standing over him. "Looks like you don't see quite so much when I smack you on your blind side, you one-eyed asshole." Zero pulled himself up, barely able to contain his still ever-present smile. There was no hint that Vincent's punch had any effect at all. "Settle down, slugger. You were never in any real danger." Vincent's eyes twitched. "Are you kidding me?" Vincent screamed at the top of his lungs, flailing his hands out. His body shook with anxiety and anger. "I got a hole in my damn shoulder! You could have helped, but you just sat there watching? Are you blind or just heartless?" Zero raised an eyebrow and sighed. "I see more than you think," he replied calmly, dusting the sand from his clothes. "Okay, you got your little shot in, and you blew off some steam. But now, we need to get going." "No," Vincent interjected aggressively. "You've had a problem with me since the second we met, and I'm sick of your attitude." "My attitude? That's rich." Zero's expression turned cold, and his piercing gaze set Vincent back, if only a little. "You're a sheltered brat who acts like you've suffered so damned much, when in reality, you've seen nothing of the real hardships this world has to offer. Hell, you've not even seen the world outside of that pathetic little dust bowl. You seem to think you're this big hero who has no friends, solely because you have powers that others don't." Zero reared his head back and scoffed. "Don't make me laugh. Did you ever think for a second that it might not be your strength that pushes people away, but maybe your rotten personality?" Stunned, Vincent managed to utter only a few meager words. "You don't know me." "Give me a break," Zero retaliated. People are the most honest when they think they're alone, and I watched you for a full week. Then, when I finally decided it was time to reveal myself, I goaded you and gave you every opportunity to rise above the situation, to show me something, anything, to indicate that you're worthy of becoming the Melee Lord. You're brash, temperamental, cocky, and stubborn, just to name a few. Don't project your inadequacies onto others and then tell yourself it's because you're special. And there I was, the reason Zero seemed to get under his skin so easily. Despite being cold and unfeeling, Zero was laying bare all the insecurities that Vincent had buried deep within himself. Vincent's chin fell on his chest, and his eyes into the sand. But Zero gave Vincent's clear embarrassment no reprieve. Look, you can throw a tantrum all you like, but you'll not land another punch. Like it or not, Vincent, you're the new Lord, and you're coming with us. He turned his back on Vincent and walked to the boat without another word. Still ashamed and embarrassed, Vincent struggled to put one foot in front of the other. Why was he going along with these people? Clearly, he was not wanted. They were just completing a mission, and he was their target. Lost in self-pity and deprecating thought, Vincent suddenly felt a light pat on his shoulder. It was Agito. Hey man, look, don't worry about it for now. You might not believe this after what Zero just said, but we're your friends and comrades now, even Mr. Grumpy over there. So let's get going, okay? He smiled gently with an air of genuine affection. If Zero's ability was to pinpoint a person's greatest insecurities, then Agito's was to soothe and provide comfort. Agito made his way towards the boat, while Kira was already perched on the railing, having moved without Vincent noticing yet again. Vincent closed his eyes for a moment and inhaled deeply. He held his breath for a few seconds in meditation, thinking back to the people of Ryuuga and the good he'd hoped to do for the community. He could feel his emotional state easing. Zero watched patiently without a word. He had been standing on the beach waiting for everyone so he could push the boat free from the white dunes and embark. Vincent opened his eyes slowly and exhaled through a controlled breath. Surprisingly, he felt a little better and loaded himself onto the boat, moving past Zero without acknowledgement. Zero pushed the boat free from the sand. It whirled to life in perfect unison with technology and mechanical prowess before speeding off into the distance over the endless ocean. As the boat pulled away into the open waters, Agito pulled a tarpaulin canopy overhead and attached it from one end of the boat to the other, covering the 4 occupants almost entirely. The cloaking technology works best on stationary objects and closed vehicles, but this is an open-air boat, so this canopy reflects the sky and the ocean surrounding us and camouflages the boat, Agito helpfully informed. No sense in a secret base if everyone can see you coming and going, you know? Several hours passed, and a full moon hung high in the sky. Vincent peered from beneath the canopy and stared into the endless empty darkness. You asked how I got these scars, Agito said quietly. After hours of traveling in awkward silence, Vincent jumped at the sound of his voice. I come from a massive city west of here, called Brisden. It's about the size of the Ryuuga metropolis, but it's one of the tech capitals of Ko. My father was the head of the Noriega Familia, and extremely wealthy. Vincent leaned closer, eager to hear more. Well, to tell you properly about my scars, there's a little world history you need to be aware of. Do you know what a relic is? Agito asked. Vincent shook his head as Agito fiddled with the pendant around his neck, rubbing the green crystal with his thumb. Relics are a product of the Golden Age, a bygone era, in a time where magic was everywhere and everyone could wield it. Records from back then are vague at best, but one thing we do know is that these relics were made to fight against a demonic horde that invaded about 1,000 years ago. They attacked without warning and nearly wiped out the entire planet. Historians later called this the Rapture. Anyway, these relics are wearable items infused with powerful magics, giving the wielder the ability to use all sorts of powers. To this day, we know very little about who the invading army was or where they came from, but it was their spilled demonic blood upon the lands that gave rise to a terrible epidemic. A plague that infected and altered many life forms, twisting them into demented and foul creatures. This was known as the Dark Calendar. Vincent became slack-jawed in disbelief. It was actually during the Dark Calendar that hellhounds were born or created. Vincent hadn't realized that he had been holding his breath. The shock on his face was all too clear to Agito, even in the moonlit darkness. Agito smiled, enjoying Vincent's rapt attention. The woodwolf was once a calm and good-natured canine, but the plague changed their appearances and temperament and altered them from diurnal hunters to nocturnal creatures that could no longer stand the light. This plague was but one of 3 near-extinction events during the time of the Dark Calendar. Millions perished, and the remaining relics were eventually scattered and lost throughout the world. Agito was a born storyteller. Even Kira was completely still, pretending not to listen while secretly enjoying the tale. Vincent hung on every word. Agito held his pendant to the moonlight, catching its dazzling green hue. Some relics are more powerful than others, and some were even able to manipulate the elements themselves. These are considered the rarest. Agito ignited a small flame from the tip of his index finger. "Would you put that thing out?" Zero barked quietly, emerging from a dark corner and interrupting the mysterious atmosphere. "Light can't be cloaked. I'd rather not have our position compromised because you want to give this moron a history lesson." Agito rolled his eyes at Zero, but the flame vanished instantly. "You see, this relic is one of the most valuable in existence. It controls the element of fire. At some point during the Dark Calendar, the fire and lightning relics were subject to a military experiment, fusing them together. It would have given the user the ability to control 2 elements from the one relic. This, in turn, would have given rise to all sorts of powers being infused and stockpiled into destructive relics of unfathomable power." Vincent gingerly touched the crystal, sliding his finger across the glassy surface. "I'm guessing that didn't work out then?" Vincent asked, looking up at Agito. Quite the opposite. They succeeded. The 2 elemental relics were fused, becoming a relic known as the Sunstorm Crystal. Unfortunately, the destructive power proved far too great, and it was eventually separated again, using the same alchemy that created it. Vincent released the crystal. He was struggling to keep track of all this new information. "What's alchemy?" he asked, ignoring a poorly covered laugh from Zero. "As I mentioned before, thousands of years ago, all humans were born with magic," Agito explained while maintaining an air of mystery. "From what the records show, society was entirely different back then. Over time, we evolved and developed science. Eventually, humans began combining scientific methods and formulas into the magics they cast. This gave birth to alchemy. It's said that we were able to do incredible things with alchemy, things that were once thought impossible. We're not sure what happened, but humans lost the ability to cast magic at some point after the rapture, and thus, alchemy was lost to us forever. That's also why we can't make new relics anymore either." Vincent's eyes had glazed over. "Right," he said weakly. Agito smirked. "I know this is a lot, but my story will bring you up to speed on a lot of what you need to know. In fact, I think that's why I was one of the people sent to escort you." "Oh yeah? And why was the Cyclops sent? Just to piss me off?" Vincent quipped, flicking his head in Zero's direction. "I was sent to kick your ass." Best assignment I've ever been given, too," he chuckled, still looking straight ahead. Agito cleared his throat. "Anyway, my father was obsessed with the legend of the Sunstorm Crystal. He used his wealth and power to research the origin of the 2 halves, and managed to purchase the fire relic in a black market bidding war." Agito hesitated, his face darkening. "Then, when I was 11, our estate was attacked." Vincent's mind sharpened at this. "It was the middle of the night, and I remember looking for my mother in all the chaos. When I finally found her, she was vaporized by someone wielding the lightning relic in front of my eyes. I couldn't see him well amidst the fires that were engulfing the room and burning through our home. Agito was no longer looking at Vincent, and the words seemed to tumble from him as if he were replaying the events in his mind. Turns out, my father had prepared several evacuation plans in the event that we were attacked. So I was rushed out by one of the maids through a secret tunnel that ran under the mansion grounds. The maid gave me the fire relic and had me run under the cover of darkness to one of my family's safe houses on the outskirts of town. I was the sole survivor. Sadness overtook Agito's face. Seeing my mother die like that, it's one of the most vivid memories I have from my childhood, and it still haunts me to this day. Agito trailed off, lost in thought. Vincent was quiet, waiting patiently for Agito to continue and unsure how to respond. I lived in that safe house for 7 years, raised in secret by an elderly woman who'd been secretly employed by my father for longer than I'd been alive. She passed away when I was 18, and so I moved out, traveling on my own. For about 1.5 years, I wandered aimlessly. I was aggressive and violent to everyone, and I was consumed with a thirst for vengeance. That is, until I met the director. Agito's expression softened. I like to think that my scars from that night represent the family that I lost. My mother and my father, he said, running his fingers down the cross-shaped scar on his cheek. And my older sister, Sophia. He tenderly touched the single slash across his left eye. Vincent's stomach was churning. He was beside himself with grief for Agito. Loss and the need for vengeance were something he could understand all too well. As for family, he had lost his own mother and father to sickness when he was young, followed by his grandfather soon after that. He knew what it was like to be alone. I'm so sorry, Vincent whispered sadly. Agito smiled. Thanks, but you don't need to be sorry. I carried the guilt of surviving for many years, and while I still want to find the man responsible, I'm no longer living for vengeance alone. I'm the sole survivor of the Noriegas. Despite the newspapers reporting that we all had died, I was entrusted this relic, and I'll carry it with pride each and every day that I draw breath. I'll find my family's murderer and bring them to justice. All the while, I'll become stronger while protecting the weak. Vincent found himself in awe of Agito. Never in his life had he met someone with such a calm yet unwavering resolve. It was something that he wished to emulate within himself. Terrible things happen to innocent people all the time, Agito continued. And you'll find that everyone in our organization has their own tumultuous history. After all, you don't find yourself working for Grave if you've lived a comfortable life. But you'll also find that great strength can come from turmoil and adversity. Regardless, we've all come together to use our abilities for the sake of others. That's the reason you're here too, Vincent. You can use your strength, not just for your own ambitions, but for the people of the world. I'm sure Zero at least mentioned that. Zero scoffed. Both of you quit your yammering and get some shut-eye. We should be arriving by sunrise. You'll need all the rest you can get. Actually, I have a question, Zero, Vincent replied disobediently. Zero didn't react, maintaining his gaze out onto the darkened horizon. Back when we fought, I remember standing in front of you. Then you clicked your fingers, and the next thing I remember, I was waking up on the cliffs. What the hell happened? Agito let slip a laugh, louder than he intended. Aw, you hit the poor guy with trigger? That's pretty low, Zero. He chuckled. Zero sighed deeply and looked back in Agito's direction. Yeah, but you've seen his attitude. He needed to be taken down a peg or two. What's trigger? Vincent interjected. Zero reluctantly looked over at Vincent, frustration clear on his face. He made little effort to hide that he found talking to Vincent a chore. Okay, you haven't started any fights in a few hours, so I guess I'll reward you with an answer, he belittled. You know those blasts of light I hit you with? Vincent nodded in anticipation. Well, that's a spiritual energy attack. Think of it as my fighting spirit, given physical form. You mean like in the comics? Vincent asked, his curiosity now filled with a childlike wonder. Zero sat with his elbows on his knees, bowed his head, and smirked. Yeah, pretty much. Although, I don't know what surprises me more. The fact that you understand my explanation, or that you actually get comic books back in that dust bowl you call home. Zero lifted his head to assess Vincent's reaction. Clearly, he was offended by this undeserved dig, but to Zero's astonishment, Vincent remained calm, so he continued on. Look, all Meisters can perform spiritual attacks. However, usually they do damage on contact with the target. Trigger is a move I especially developed, and it's a little different. You see, when I use this attack, I shoot energy blasts that I call sleepers into the target. Rather than exploding on impact, they're absorbed into the person's body. I can control how much of my spiritual power that I want to put into each blast, but that power lies dormant within the target until a time of my choosing. Usually, in the heat of battle, most overconfident opponents will either assume that I'm out of power or just weak. Vincent's body was tense, and he broke out in a cold sweat. His head dipped slightly, ashamed that he had made both of these assumptions during their fight. However, as he went to break eye contact, Zero leaned in closer, filling the sea air under the tarpaulin with murderous intent. I'll shoot a few into the poor sucker until I'm happy with the amount they've accumulated. And then... He then extended a single arm outward in Vincent's direction. Bang! Zero snapped his fingers, making Vincent jump a little, unconsciously clutching at his chest. You're such a douchebag sometimes, Zero, I swear, Agito judged harshly. But despite Agito's provocation, Zero had a wicked gleam in his eye as he held Vincent's gaze. This is just the beginning, Vincent. Tomorrow, the real fun begins.